Alright, good morning to all Sec 1s. Welcome to your week 2 of HBL. Today we're going to be starting our chapter on cells. This will be the second model that you'll be studying. Now, the first model that you actually studied was about the particulate model of matter, remember? And in that particular model of matter, we actually talked about why the model of matter was so important because it allows us to visualize how the particles are arranged in solid, liquids, and gases. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about the second model known as the cell model. And why is this cell model so appropriate or so important and such a good representation, or why does it show us that it represents all the cells in organisms? All right. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so for 6.1 today, we're going to be understanding basically what are cells, what are the different functions of the different parts of the cells, including the nucleus. That will be covered in 6.2. So today we're going to be looking at a brief introduction on what cells are, and I believe that before you actually listen to this lecture, you would have already covered your first SLS lesson on cells. Okay, so at the end of this section, you should be basically asking yourselves, what is a basic building block of organisms? Now, you might be wondering, Miss Lee, why do we use the word building block? Now, all of you would know that for a contractor to make a house, okay, in order for a contractor to make a house, you will need to know exactly what are the materials that the house is actually made up of. And you know that a house will be typically made up of bricks. Therefore, if we say that the building block of a house is a brick, the building block is basically what is the thing that makes up the house. So in this case, the building block of the house is a brick. Okay, if you play with Lego, then you might say, oh, what makes up a Lego plane or aeroplane? The basic block that makes up the Lego plane is basically a Lego brick. So a Lego brick is that one Lego brick that you will see that you will use to make a Lego house. So if we ask ourselves what are these organisms, we are mostly referring to plants and animals. So what makes up plants and what makes up animals? These are known as building blocks because these things are basically the ones that make you. Okay, so that's why we use the word building. All right, so therefore let's move on. So now, for 1 minute, I would like you to pause the video here. I want you to write down as many words as you can that are related to cells. Okay, so what are some of the words that you think that are related to cells? So please pause this video for 1 minute and then complete the box that's in your notes. Okay, so welcome back. Let's have a simple word splash activity. When you think of the word cells, what do you actually think about? Now, when Miss Lee thinks of the word cells, the first few things that I will basically think about, okay, would be prison cells. Alright, so I'll think of prison cells. Oops. Okay, so what would you have thought about? Let's hear some of your responses. Now, when Miss Lee thinks of the word cells, I will basically think of a prison cell. Alright, or I may think of a cell phone. I don't know whether you all can remember what a cell phone is because all of you now have an iPhone. Or I will basically think of a battery cell. Okay, I may think of what else I may think of an animal cell. I may also think of a plant cell. So I think some of you may have written some of these words down. Oh, sorry, you may also have thought about a fuel cell. Now, battery and fuel cells are basically components that you can find in a switch. You can also find these inside cars. They basically power the switches, they power the cars. Okay, so let's move on. Alright, so a cell may refer to a room in a prison cell. It may refer to like small little cells in a honeycomb. This is actually what you find when bees, these are found basically inside the homes of bees, alright? This is where they store their honey. all right, a dry cell or a battery. So your energizer batteries, the ones that you put inside your torch lights, or the ones that you put inside your electric fan, your portable fan, okay? You might also think of a cell phone. Now, this is what cell phones used to look like, okay? You are probably too young to know, but your teachers will probably know what a cell phone looks like, okay? However, in organisms, so today we're going to be focusing about organisms. In organisms, cells are the basic unit of a plant or an animal. That means both you, your pet cat, your pet rabbit, your pet dog, or even the plants or the trees outside your home, or even the grass on the fields, if you were to break a human being down, basically the basic unit of any living thing is a cell. Okay? So, what are cells? Now, can you look at this toy over here? Now, you can recognize that this is a Pokemon toy, right? You will notice that all these toys have got something in common. Can you guess what they are? Okay, good. Some of you guessed that these are the small little circles, plastic circles there, right? So all these toys are made out of small little circular plastic balls, all right? So what is common about both you and the plant? Well, what is common is we are all made out of cells, and you must know this because this will definitely be a definition that could be tested in your weighted assessment 3. Alright, so a cell is the basic unit of all living things or an organism. So if a living thing is not, basically if an object is not a living thing, that means it is a non-living object, it will not be made up of cells. Alright, so all living things are made up of either one or many cells. Okay, so cells basically, if you are made up of only one type of cell, that means you're only made up of one type of cell or one cell, you are a unicellular organism. Okay, now you might be wondering, wow, Miss Lee, this is such a big word. What does unicellular organism actually mean? So let me break this down for you. It's actually quite simple. Okay, the word uni actually means one. The word cellular basically means cell. So if you are a unicellular organism, means you are made up of only one cell. Now, definitely you and I, we are not unicellular organisms because we are definitely made up of more than one cell. Alright? Okay, so since there are two categories, it is unicellular one organism. If you are made up of more than one type of cell, if you are made up of more than one cell, you are known as multi. Now, the word that you see over here, multi actually means many. Alright? So, if you have a look at all these pictures here, these are beautiful pictures of cells. Now, the chapter of cells is so amazing, and you actually study that in bio when you're in Sec 3. So, if you look very carefully here, these are known as nerve cells. Now, nerve cells, you look at the shape of the nerve cells, they look like little tiny samosas with long string-like structures, right? These are known as extensions. Now, this is found in your blood. These are your red blood cells. They are round. You can see they are round. They look a little bit like donuts. And you can see that the on top of the surface, it doesn't look like it's flat, right? It looks like it is being punched into. Like there is a plasticine, and then you put your hand into the plasticine, and there's like a dent. There's like a dent in your plasticine. These are actually biconcave in shape. We will learn more about it later on. And these are found in your leaf cells. Okay, these are found in your leaves. These are known as your gut cells, and they look like beans. So if you look carefully here, if I can outline the size or the shape for you, alright, you would have learned about this in primary school. These are your gut cells, and they look a little bit like bean shapes, right? And the hole in between is actually known as your stomata. Now, your stomata are basically only found in plants. You can't find a stomata in a human being. Okay, so let's move on. So what is a unicellular organism? A unicellular organism is basically an organism that is only made up of one cell. Okay, now there are three main examples of unicellular organisms. Number one is known as an amoeba. Now, if you look at the amoeba, alright, it is only one cell. So this is one cell. Alright. Then you have your paramecium. This is also known as another unicellular organism. Later I will show you a video of paramecium, okay? And it's quite interesting because you get to see how the paramecium actually moves even though it's made up of only one cell. And last but not least is a plant-like structure known as your euglena. Now these, you notice, they are all made up of only one cell. Okay, I just want to show you this very simple recording. So you can see over here, look at the amoeba actually wrapping itself around two parameciums. It's actually eating it. Okay, so this is how the amoeba actually eats its prey. And you can see it's made up of only one cell, and now it's digesting the paramecium. Alright, so this is quite an interesting thing, and you can't see this with your naked eye. You can only see this in a microscope. So this is quite an interesting video that they show here. Alright, looks actually quite scary, but this is a amoeba. Alright, and this is a unicellular organism. Alright, so let's move on. So what is a multicellular organism then? Okay, a multicellular organism is basically an organism that is made up of more than one cell because of the word multi. So you and I and plants, we are all multicellular organisms. Okay, so your pet dog, your pet cat, even your pet fish, these are all multicellular organisms because they are made up of many cells. So what do we use to view cells? Now, cells are actually very small. They are microscopic. So from the word microscopic, you will know that they basically are so small that you will require the use of a microscope. Okay, now a drop of blood, alright, a drop of blood basically has got many cells, okay, millions of cells. And so basically this is what you will use in school when probably we'll find some time during the week to bring to the practical lab, alright, to make use of a microscope. These are the microscopes that you have in school. They are known as light microscopes. You may want to take that down. Alright, they are known as light microscopes. They basically allow us to see cells that are very small. So these are light microscopes, alright, that allow us to view cells. Alright, and basically one drop of cells is made up of millions of red blood cells. So why do we use microscopes? Okay, now microscopes are basically used to study cells because cells are too small to be seen by the naked eye. And microscope allows them to be enlarged so that you can see them clearer. So you just think of a microscope as a really fancy, extremely useful magnifying glass. Now, you know, detectives always use a magnifying glass to try and see things clearly, right? So basically your microscope is just an entirely big, huge, enormous magnifying glass that will allow you to see extremely small cells clearly. Alright, so let me just show you some pictures of beautiful cells. So these are some micro-imaging of cells. Now, why are the cells colored? They are not colored because they look colored in your body, but because there are some microscopes that will allow the cells to reflect certain colors because these cells are already dyed. That means they use a pigment or a dye to color it. Alright, these are actually onion cells. You will get to try making onion cells, alright, using your microscope. These are your red blood cells. Now, you might be wondering, what are these big, huge, circular, purplish blood cells here? These are your white blood cells. Now, your white blood cells are so important, especially in this COVID-19 situation. Your white blood cells are basically the soldiers of your body. You know what soldiers do, right? Soldiers, they go out and fight a battle, right? So your white blood cells actually fight the battles of your body versus when you are being infected by bacteria or even viruses. So your white blood cells are so important because they are your first line of defense. They are your immunity. Okay, so these are some of the microscopes. This is the microscope that you will see in school. They basically, this microscope is what we call a light microscope, and it's the most basic form of microscope. This is your electron microscope. This is something that is slightly more complicated. It will allow you to see even more magnified and clearer versions of tiny organisms, cells, or even objects. Now this is basically a human hair. All right, and of course you have your transmission electron microscopy. These two types of microscopes you won't be able to see in schools, probably only in the university or even in research labs. All right, so before we end our exciting lecture about cells, all right, you might be wondering, did you know that you have 50 trillion cells in your human body? We're not talking about millions. We're not talking about billions. We are talking about 50 trillion cells. Now, that is probably many, many cells in your human body, and that's why we are multicellular organisms. All right, and human nerve cells can live for more than 100 years and are not replaced when they die. That means, cells, cells in your body have the ability to repair itself. Now, when you have a small cut, for example, if you are cutting a fruit and you accidentally slip and maybe the knife gives you a small little cut at the tip of your finger, you realize that you bleed, but after a while the wound actually heals. That's because your skin cells are able to regenerate and they are able to be repaired, and so the hole on your wound is able to close up. But nerve cells, which are found in the human brain, they can live for 100 years and they are not being replaced when they die. That means when they die, when nerve cells start to die, they are not being repaired. And that's why when people suffer from dementia or even from Alzheimer's disease, it is something that is irreparable because nerve cells are unable to be replaced or repaired. Alright, and you have 3 million red blood cells, and these are replaced each second, and every single red blood cell can only live for about 100 and 120 days. That means it's about a total of only 3 to 4 months. And if you think about it, okay, if they only live for 3 to 4 months, every 3 to 4 months you need to produce new red blood cells, and that's why the human body is such an amazing machine, because it's able to produce new cells every minute. Alright, especially your red blood cells. Alright, so I'm going to end this lecture by showing you another unicellular organism known as the paramecium. The first one that we saw was the amoeba. So now let's have a look at your paramecium. So you can see that the paramecium is basically a unicellular organism, and you can definitely see many small little circles inside the paramecium, right? Okay, so these little circles that you see inside here are basically components of a cell. And in 6.2, we are going to be looking at what makes a cell. Okay? Alright, so in 6.2, we're going to be talking about what is inside a typical cell, and I hope that you will read 6.1 of your textbook. And for those of you who have not completed your SLS, please make sure that you complete your SLS Lesson 1, which will require you to complete a practical worksheet 6.1, activity 6.1 of your practical workbook, Volume A. So till we meet again for lecture 6.2, this is goodbye from Miss Lee, and we hope that you have a fruitful HBL.